Hello, kind people. This is Dmitry. Breaking news. We have a listener by Elgin. This is my first Elgin's listener. I started solving in 2021, and I think his previous one came the year before in 2020. And in 2018, Elgin produced a listener called Doing a Sort, which is regarded by some as the best cryptic crossword, thematic cryptic crossword ever. There are two fantastic videos on Cracking the Cryptic channel by Mark Goodliff and Simon Anthony, where they solve this puzzle, Doing a Sort, and they solve also Symphony Batetic by Elgin. And both of those puzzles are stunning, and I strongly recommend those videos, and I think I'll put a link to them in the video description. So I was eagerly anticipating my very first Elgin listener. This is not my first Elgin puzzle, though. I think over this 3 years I've been doing MacPie, there were 4 maybe Elgin puzzles, or 3 or 4. And while I did enjoy them, I think they were kind of not at the same level really as those masterpieces. And I thought maybe Elgin was just saving for the listener. So let's have a look at this one. It's called Friends. The grid looks fairly normal, apart from the barred off cell in the middle. Let's read the preamble. 20 clues need a word removed to enable solving. These clues' initials are arranged to form a 5-word message in the 4 unclued entries. After entering all answers, replace each letter in these entries with the first letter of the corresponding clue's extra word to show the names of 4 lady friends. The same sequence can be encoded differently according to the message to produce the letter for the central square and the names of 3 from a different set of 4 friends. Write these names below the grid and highlight the name of the 4th friend linked to the source of the lady friends, along with the 3-word name of where they met. Every final grid entry is a word, phrase, or name. Chambers Dictionary is the primary reference, 22 is in Collins, which I think in this case is a typo, 21 is in Collins, rather than 22. So the way I think I should show this puzzle is basically just ignore the grid fill and just show the end game. Because the grid fill was not that difficult, and all the trickery here is in the end game. So I'm going to just go all the way to, this sort of stage. So this is what you get if you fill all the clued entries. Maybe we can have a look at some of the words. I don't know. Darlena's to destroy nylon line she has. I believe this is, for whatever reason, an indicator of a Scottish word. Is it a Scottish name? Is it a Scottish town? I don't think it's a town, but anyway. So it is a Scottish word for to destroy, and nylon is an extra word, and so line she has is her railway, RY being an abbreviation for railway, and so line also means railway. Now, here, as you can see, I wrote next to the clue the first letter of the clue itself, and then the first letter of the extra word, because we then would need to replace one from the other. And if you now look at the unclued entries, in the unclued entries here are this one, the symmetric one, that one, this one, and that one. We can see that if we try to get a 5-word message out of here, and if we also look at which letters are left among the first letters of the clues which have extra words, we'd see that, so for example, this C here corresponds to this C here, and so on. And like, the word code, so this O is this O, or possibly that one, because you can see there are two starting O's, and so on. So, in other words, like, it's reasonably easy then to fill the rest of the unclued entries, and the message we get is code uses middle or last. At least this is the natural reading. I don't think any other arrangement of those words makes a sensible message. And then you start, as it's suggested, replacing each letters with the first letter of the corresponding clue's extra word. And again, this is not too hard. And this is not too hard, partially because we know that what remains should be the extra word, the real words. And for some of them, it's just there is no choice. So, for example, the only out of this set of extra words and clues with extra words, the only clue which starts with C is this one. And so C has to be replaced with J. Let me maybe do this. And now let's start replacing. So this has to become J. And then it becomes a little bit trickier because, for example, there are two different O's. Well, in this case, both of those O's, they result in A. So again, we could confidently replace this O with A and this O with A, and so on. And so combine this fact that we need to end up with 4 lady friends, and that we have this sets of pairs of letters, and that we have to have real words resulting from this transformation. It's not that easy to then get this right, and we get Jane, Angela, Sapphire, and Ella. And as you can see, like Alan from Alan Key becomes Alien, and Steel becomes Stel, both real words. What else? Cody becomes Copy, and so on. So all the words stay real words. But now comes the interesting part here. The same sequence, they say, can be encoded differently according to the message to produce the letter for the central square and the names of 3 from a different set of 4 friends. Write these names below the grid and blah, 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 and highlight the name of the 4th friend and where they met. Now, so what does that mean? Well, so code uses middle or last, right? So for example, here, note that all of those extra words, they have odd number of letters. So they have a middle letter, and obviously they have the last letter. So for example, for this clue, C, which was decoded originally to J, now if we use middle or last, it has to be decoded to either U or T, right? And so then the next one is O. In this sentence, code uses middle or last. And for O, we know that we have 2 candidates, OA or A. So that decodes to either U or Z, or I or E, and so on. So I wrote this whole sequence down here. So UT, and then there is this. So there are several, 4 slots. There are 2 pairs of similar the same letters in the original encoding. So there is this OA, and then the other one is this SL. And so for those you have 4 different candidates, and for this you have 2. And so here you have UZ, IE, and then you have LN, IM, blah, 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 and so on. And once you start doing that, you kind of spot here something rather familiar. You spot Tin Man Scare, and basically I would not be surprised if a lot of solvers, because this is a painful process writing out this thing, once they spotted this, they could realize that it would be Tin Man, Scarecrow, and Lion. And then if you look at the grid, and indeed, as you can see, we have here Tin Man, Scarecrow, and Lion. And then the fourth friend is obviously Dorothy, and you can spot Dorothy here. And then if we put O in the central letter, we get, oh, sorry, I need to change the, so in this grid, I haven't changed things yet. So this is Jane, this is Angela. Oh, and I haven't really talked about where they come from. So those four ladies are characters from a comic opera by the GNS comic opera called Patience. And so how does that go? That became Sapphire, and that was Ella. And so now you can see that here we have Land of Oz, and here we have Dorothy if we put O in the central letter. And then we can write down here, Tin Man, Scarecrow, and Lion. And I wouldn't be surprised if a lot of solvers were going to do that. However, and then, there is some connection of Dorothy. Dorothy is another comic opera that is not by Gilbert and Sullivan, but is in their style. So there is some link here between, the fourth friend and the source of the four lady friends. However, if you're doing it carefully, you would realize that there is something wrong here. And there's actually quite a lot of kind of red flags here. So, well, the most obvious one is, if you look at this Tin Man and Scarecrow, Scarecrow is split by this supposedly a space for this extra letter, and none of these letters is O, which is the one we want to put in the middle to make Dorothy and Land of Oz. So this is weird. Is this a typo? Did Saber... Oh, Saber. Sorry, this is Saber-esque. So did Elgin make a mistake? But also, even if you just look at this whole construction, like if this was indeed the case, that this is what we needed to do, why bother with this really strange construction where you have to select one of the two letters, middle or last? In such situations, it is always advisable to look at the other letters and see whether we get anything from them. The other red flag that I think kind of alerted my suspicions was that there are all these Z's here that are unused. And these are not the easy letters to put either in the grid or into the word, so there must be some purpose to them. And in Tin Man, Scarecrow, and Lion, there is no Z. And the other thing is that... what was I going to say? There was some other red flag there, I think. Yeah, well, maybe the other one is that the connection between Dorothy and... there isn't any specific connections between Dorothy and Patience, the comic opera. So that is another thing that might potentially raise someone's suspicions. And also... what happened to me then was I thought, well, what about... So what this says here is that the same sequence is producing the letter and the names of 3 from a different set of 4 friends. And so I thought, because it mentions the letter first, I thought, what about the letter actually is the first one? And I looked at U and T, and I thought it's more likely to be U than T. And then what I thought, if we do put U here, then there is a possibility of Ruth here. And that although a completely wrong thought, but it made me sort of look in the right direction, as it turned out. Because then I was trying to make sense of the remaining words. So if I think that U is the correct one, then I thought Eliphaz, and I really want to make this use of this Z. Is that a word? And then we have Bildad, and then we have here. We haven't used this Z first, yet. So how about we use that Z now? Zophar. And if you Google those three folks, or at least any of them, you immediately realize that these are the three friends of Job from the biblical book of Job, not the book of Ruth. And indeed, there is Job in the grid, and the fourth friend. And if you try to find out, maybe you do know if you are, if your knowledge of Old Testament is good enough. But if not, if you try and Google where Job lived, it turns out that he lived in the land of Uz. And so indeed, now this central letter makes perfect sense, and the correct highlighting is this one, and the correct friends to be written below the grid are Eliphaz, Bildad, and I hope I have not messed them up, because I haven't really looked them up recently. I mean, I did it when I solved the puzzle, but I might have messed up some of the letters, but that does sound right. But so yeah, a massive red herring, and I enjoyed it a lot. I think it's perfectly fair to, solvers have to trust the setters to not make mistakes like, wrong letter in the most important square of the whole puzzle. And the final comment here is that I think the solvers who were doing the Magpie regularly had some advantage here, because this is not the first time that Elgin is playing this trick. In 2022, in December edition of the Magpie, so in November and December, there were two special editions to mark 20th anniversary of the Magpie, where each puzzle was constructed by the winner, the previous winner of the puzzle of the year. And Elgin was one of them. And he came up with a puzzle called Get the Bird. And now, as I'm saying this, I'm mildly confused that I actually want to check that it was Elgin and not Saber, because it would be really funny if those two get confused in my head and it was Saber in the end. But I'm pretty sure it was Elgin. But let me check. Let me quickly check this. Magpie archive. Get the bird. Yeah, of course it was Elgin. Okay. Oof. So Elgin's puzzle there was called Get the Bird, and presented a very similar misdirection, where it was very tempting to find in the grid it was the real names or the nicknames or both of the Magpie editing team of Mark and Simon, and then the Magpie, I think, appeared there as well. But in fact, this was also just a colossal red herring, and in fact, it was about Maltese Falcon, and you had to find, I think, Joe Cairo and Sydney Greenstreet there, or just their characters. So Casper Gutman, I can't remember, but anyway, so there was a completely different bird and a completely different set of characters that you had to find in the grid. So I think that the Magpie solvers came prepared better for this week's puzzle. And also I want to note that last week's puzzle also had a misdirection, right? So there were this different set of fives, and I was wondering about the sort of last week's puzzle. It was fine, but I mean, I don't think it was, on the same like firework sort of level. Uh, and now I have this thought that maybe the editorial team of the listener put them together so that the solvers get prepared to this much more subtle and much more trickier misdirection by solving last week's one. So anyway, I enjoyed it immensely, and I I hope that those who actually ended up, failing to solve it, they still would, and those who fall into the trick, they would appreciate that, you know, it was absolutely fair, and they just got tricked. Because I think there were enough warnings, and this whole construction otherwise would be such an overkill for a reasonably trivial endgame. So thanks a lot, Elgin. Yeah, this is a wonderful puzzle, and another strong contender for Puzzle of the Year. I think we have about 10 of them by now, which is nowhere near how things stood last year. I think last year there were top three very, very obvious ones, and this year it's going to be a very tough vote in the end. Thank you for watching, and see you next week. Bye.